Corruption in boxing here. A little bit late, but I wanted to preview and make a prediction on yet another excellent weekend, potentially of fights on two different networks. 3 fights specifically, 2 of them on the ESPN, I believe, and the other fight, I think it's on Fox or Showtime. Let's start with the rematch at 118 pounds. 122. Isaac Dogboe and Emmanuel Naverette. Naverette having scored the upset, and Top Rank have obviously paid him a lot of money to try and run this one back straight away. First fight ended on points, but it was a convincing sort of dominating win for Naverette. Dogboe alluded to difficulties in his training camp, perhaps underestimating his opponent, and he didn't look in the best of shape as well. So Paul Dogboe has decided to bring in a nutritionist to see if they can remediate those deficiencies. But the problem I have in this fight is that now Naverette has a 5-inch height advantage. He also has a reach advantage. Now, Isaac Dogboe being an orthodox pressure fighter, an inside fighter, phone box type of fighter, his objective is to try and come inside where he can work combinations, because he's essentially a power puncher, especially to the body, and a vicious power puncher he is, very heavy-handed. But Dogboe is very much like Chris Eubank Jr., super middleweight from the UK. Now, the fighters that have been able to control Eubank Jr., Billy Joe Saunders and George Groves, both have world-class jabs. You saw in the last fight that Jr. was able to walk James DeGale down and pretty much bludgeon him all over the place. That's because James DeGale absolutely has no jab. Now, this is the same with Isaac Dogboe. He doesn't try and jab his way to get inside the pocket. So when he beat Jesse Magdaleno, Magdaleno is an 85% power puncher who doesn't really have a jab. He's essentially a counter puncher, but he tries to rock back on his foot to lure you in, and it's definitely instigated by a big booming left hand. So Dogboe's task of trying to navigate in, firing the occasional jab but power punching essentially his way through, was a lot easier than compared to Emmanuel Naverette. Now that's a fighter who understands his attributes, understands that he has the higher ground. He has a very good jab, but more importantly, he's a fighter who understands range. So whenever Dogboe would try and come inside, Naverette would not only fire jabs to try and fence him away, but he'd utilize a lot better angles, but then he wouldn't be too greedy and remain inside. He'll try and break range, so keep extending distance. So Dogboe has the disadvantage of trying to re-navigate, try and slip Naverette's punches from long range to come inside, and that was a hell of a painful task. He just getting picked off. Naverette realised that Dogboe not only has a problem of not jabbing his way inside the pocket, but he tends to lunge in with his punches, given that he's only 5'2". He's at a real physical disadvantage. But also he doesn't really have much of a defense, taking too many punches flush. A young athlete may be able to do so, but the accumulative factor was what eventually did it. Naverette was hurting Dogboe pretty much for the latter part of the fight. Dogboe's face got severely marked up as well. Extremely brave to have survived the 12 rounds, but he got a comprehensive, beating. Now in this fight, Isaac may be a little bit fitter, but I don't think conditioning is his problem. I think it's a case of it's just a stylistic nightmare. Plus it's fundamental deficiencies he has. He doesn't have a robust defense. He doesn't have a very good jab, or he underutilizes a jab. Actually, when he uses it, it's not a bad jab. But he's a power puncher, doesn't really use his jab that much. A little bit too flat-footed. He walks in straight lines, just walking through the front door, not through the side door, back door. I think Naverette realizes that. I think he's going to be able to fence him off with his jab, and that's going to be the key weapon for him. But Naverette is a little bit more versatile as well. He can fight bouncing up and down. He's very light on his feet, can get up on his toes and move laterally. So a difficult task for Isaac, but I fancy Naverette here retaining his belt, probably on points. Dogboe strong, can take a punch, although Magdalena did floor him, but he came back and knocked him out. So he does have heart. Does have resilience, but I'm gonna have to go with Emmanuel Navarrete retaining his belts, probably on points. Now the main event is a rematch, super featherweight, between Miguel Berchelt up against Francisco Vargas, El Bandito. A rematch once again. Berchelt had taken Vargas' WBC super featherweight belt, not sure when it was, probably about 2 years ago I think. Vargas, a little bit poorly managed, just been in too many wars. Takashi Miura was fight of the year. Orlando Salido, which was even better, one of the best fights of the past 25 years. I don't care what anybody says. An amazing fight. And with Miguel Berchelt subsequently as well, his old compatriot from Mexico. Berchelt, very heavy-handed fighter, one defeat very early in his career. Vargas, I think technically he's a better boxer. Beautiful straight puncher, has a very good jab, straight right hand. Can fight at long range, but he chooses to fight inside the pocket. Mexican warrior, he just wants to engage and have a dogfight. Not a wise strategy, but he's a fan's favorite type of fighter, an Arturo Gatti type of fighter. And for his troubles of entertaining the crowd, and he's done so, he's just accumulated far too much facial damage. He's had plastic surgery to repair, scar tissue, remove a lot of that tissue as well. But that's my worry in this fight. Miguel Berchelt, very heavy-handed fighter, good combination of puncher, has a fantastic educated lead left hand. He can fire off a lead uppercut, then hook, then finish off with a jab. So he does a reverse 1-3 combination, which is very unusual in boxing. I don't see many people utilize offensive punches like that. Vargas is going to have to try and box a lot more in this fight. Berchelt is the shorter fighter, but he seems to be heavier in terms of his bulk, the girth of his body, and just his sheer size. He looks a lot more stockier. Compact punches. Did a good job in the first fight of moving laterally to take away Vargas' straight right hand. Vargas may have just been in one too many wars. I think he'll be competitive given that he's had a recent breather, fighting Rod Skulka and Stephen Smith in the sort of a reverse order. So he's come back with 2 stoppages, giving him a little bit of confidence going into this fight. But the smart money really is on Miguel Berchelt. I think Vargas is just, I think he has the ability to survive, and I think he has the ability to win as well, but the facial damage is my worry. The eye, particularly his right eye, the scar tissue, the very delicate tissue above, I think it's going to open up. Berchelt's jab is going to probably open it up. He's going to have trouble seeing as well. So either his corner stops it, or there's some sort of a retirement, or the referee stops it. But I see Miguel Berchelt winning this fight by knockout, stroke technical knockout. Not sure of the round, but I'm sure it'll go at least 6 rounds. But I'm going with Berchelt by stoppage. So that's the ESPN card. Great co-main event and main event. Over to the PBC on Fox Sports. The undercard is nothing that spectacular. Prospects in Mario Barrios coming up. You've got Matvey Korobov up against Emmanuel Aline, which could be an interesting fight. Korobov, who had a great showing against Jamal Charlo, up against Aline, so not sure about that one. Maybe Korobov gets it on points. He's not really a heavy-handed fighter, you know, a cerebral, sort of slick southpaw boxer. Certainly more skillful than Aline. But Aline seems to be backed by the PBC, so I'm sure they want the younger fighter in the lean to prevail, so maybe there's some skullduggery there, but I think Korobov should have enough to outbox him. But the main event, very intriguing fight, a fight that has just been slept on. Hurd defending his IBF and WBA super 154 pound light middleweight or super welterweight. Belts up against Julian J. Rock Williams, who was one of the most touted prospects at the time when Erickson Lubin, Julian Williams and Jarrod Hurd were very early in their professional career. The consensus was that Julian Williams was the better fighter and that he would win a world title a lot quicker. But I saw Jarrod Hurd on Showbox, and I always felt he was the stronger fighter, and you know, my sort of faith in him paid off. At one stage they were describing him as the worst world champion when he defeated Tony Harrison. But slowly he's won over the public, and the win over Erislandy Lara solidified himself as a highly credible world champion. 6'1", so he has a 3-inch height advantage over Julian Williams. Both of them fighting, in an orthodox position. Now, Julian Williams, given that he was brutally knocked out by Jamal Charlo in, I'm not sure, I think it was around 6 rounds. The worrying component was that he was floored by a good stiff jab by Charlo, and then finished off with like a peach of an uppercut. I felt that was in some aspects, I think it was a humbling defeat, but it was something that Williams may have needed. He was far too arrogant, and he'd pissed off a lot of the 154 pound division, proclaiming that he was the best before he'd even earned his spurs. So a lot of fighters were almost rooting for Charlo to knock him out. But I think he's gone back, and he may have exercised some of them demons when he fought the Jamaican Nate Gallimore, who was a heavy-handed fighter. Now Julian Williams is a plus 600. So the smart money is definitely on Williams for the upset. Now he's not that small, he'll come in about 170 pounds as well. I think he'll rehydrate about 15, 16 pounds, so not as heavy-handed as Jarrod Hurd, who is more of an attritional type of puncher, but he can put you to sleep on the inside, you know, especially to the body, as he did up against Jason Welborn from the UK. You know, he was fucking around for a few rounds, getting a little bit beaten up, but I think he was fighting down to the level of his opposition. Just came back from shoulder surgery, so it was a tune-up fight. His corner were a little bit angry and agitated, saying, what are you doing, you know, stop fucking around and, you know, put this guy in a coffin. So then he just, you know, stepped on the inside, you know, started firing them booming left hooks to the body, and that's all she wrote for Welborn. Now Julian Williams is very good on the inside, and I think he may have to fight it on the inside against Jarrod Hurd. Hurd, who is a relentless pressure fighter, one of the best in boxing, takes a lot of punches flush, doesn't really move his head off the center axis. You know, he's just got a huge pumpkin head. Somehow he's just able to take punches flush and just repel firepower. Extraordinary sort of type of fighter. Maybe it's the extra weight, maybe it's the, you know, the 175, 180 pounds that he comes in. Don't know how the fuck he makes it to 154 pounds. Well, that's rhetorical, but tough task for Julian Williams. Maybe the better boxer as well, but Jarrod Hurd cuts off the ring. One of the best fighters, along with Roman Gonzalez, who was around in terms of cutting off the ring swiftly. Swift being his name, no pun intended, but Jarrod Hurd reminds me a lot of Diego Corrales. Gives away his height and his reach. Loves to fight on the inside, and is one of the best combination punches on the inside. This fight might be a little bit like a Corrales and Castillo, two guys, you know, fighting on the inside, so there could be some memorable exchanges in this fight. I think it's going to be a terrific fight. Julian Williams can certainly upset the card here. Can he stay away from Jarrod Hurd's relentless pressure during the second half of the fight, where it's going to be key? Hurd is just a master of exerting physical and psychological pressure. A little bit like Golovkin, because he's continuously stalking you, walking you down. Jab, he's very awkward straight right hands, left hooks. Very unique fighter in boxing, what he does. He'll take two punches to give one back, and the one back has the extra mustard, so the accumulated factor, the attritional puncher that he is. And that's what he did to Erislandy Lara, forcing Lara, really an old man, to try and stand and trade. That's what Hurd wanted. So eventually Lara had to, the age and the energy depleting, and that's when Hurd stepped it up and put him down on the canvas, gave Lara a vicious beating in the last, you know, 2 rounds. So how Erislandy Lara can cry robbery is a fucking travesty. He was clearly beaten in that fight. No disputes there. So in this fight, I'm a little bit worried about Jarrod Hurd's chin. Julian Williams' chin. I'm not sure he's going to be able to repel fire with Jarrod Hurd for 12 rounds. He's going to have to try and win his respect, but he's not a heavy concussive puncher. Can certainly stun him, but Hurd is relentless, will just keep on coming. There's also the weight issue now, where Hurd doesn't have a lot of time at 154 pounds. We've seen a lot of fighters lose when they didn't go up when they should have. Daigo Higo was definitely one of them. Jesse Magdalena was the other as well. so it can definitely happen. Lee Selby was the other, should have moved up before Josh Warrington beat him. Then he subsequently moved up 2 weight divisions. But I haven't heard any stories about Hurd, cutting weight drastically during the last week because he's having difficulty in shedding in the weight. If you look at his frame, he is tall, but he's skinny as well. He doesn't have broad shoulders. So the weight is sort of distributed equally. It's not bulky or muscular. He's pretty much outboxed for the first half of the fight. Austin Trout was outboxing him before Hurd eventually busted up his eye. The veteran Trout couldn't do it anymore. Tony Harrison was outboxing Jarrett Hurd, but he's a fantastic underrated boxer as well, who came back and won a world title, and he's heavy-handed as well. Eventually Hurd knocking him out, ducking underneath his punch and just, and a killer straight one punch took him out. So I'm going to have to go with... I'm leaning towards Jarrett Hurd on this one. Maybe Julian Williams can survive on points, but Hurd's volume, his pressure, his size, and his extra weight of punch, I think it would probably be a little bit too much for Julian Williams. Could go either way. I've definitely put at 50 euros on Julian Williams at plus 600. It's worth a little bit of money, but overall I think I'll go 1,000 euros accumulator on Jarrett Hurd, Manuel Naverette, and Miguel Berchelt TKO. I'll go with Jarrett Hurd on points, Naverette on points as well, Berchelt by TKO knockout. But it's a hard one. I've been thinking about these fights all week, really flipping around. But you just gotta go with your instincts sometimes. Do your research, watch the fight. Never bet against a fighter that you haven't seen before. So yeah, that's my predictions. Let me know what your predictions are, who you got for the 3 fights. Sure, everybody's going to be split in what they think, but it's nice to catch the opinion of your subscribers, anybody else in the public domain. But it should be a great night of boxing. It's a pity they're happening on the same time. Fox going head to head with ESPN. So it's going to be a case of 2 monitors in simultaneity watching the fights, because both of them have to be watched live. So yeah, corruption in boxing. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll catch up with you guys for a post-fight review. Adios.